translation between this is non-existent, I should say. It's the same argument. Here is Trudeau literally making the exact same argument as he made about the dirty unvaccinators, right? They're racist and they're anti-science and they're, all these highly credentialed scientists are apparently anti-science according to this non-scientist. That makes sense. But she says substitute unvaccinated with net zero denier. This is your future. Same point. He says it's in French, so I'll just read what you can listen to it for yourself. They don't believe in science progress and are very often misogynistic. Where's that even come from? So you don't believe that the science around this is sound, so therefore you hate women or you're racist against a certain race? I mean, there's nothing that connects those things. This is their clumsy patched together argument about anybody they claim as a conspiracy theorist. It says this leads us as a leader and as a country to make a choice. Do we tolerate these people? Apparently now he gets to decide whether you're even allowed to be there. Not like you have rights and, constitution. No. It's now a dictator's choice to decide whether you get to exist because you don't agree with him. Democracy? Representative government? Not even close. Not that you should even want that. But before we get into the continuation of the COVID-19 discussion, I needed to put this in here somewhere because this is utterly ridiculous. Now, if we're talking about somebody who's literally pointing at you and saying, you don't know science, you're racist, misogynist, anti-science denier, as he points to things that he says are the sound scientific studies, right? So we trust them. They know. Well, how about we consider this next story in there and really digest or dissect, whether they have the ability for discernment, whether they care about whether these scientific studies are correct or not, or they just point at what they want to use, right? This is called the Diagolon story. Now, many of you have seen this, and I'm just going to skim over this for the most part because it's just hilarious, but it's not. I recommend you read through these articles. I'll show you. But the point of this story is Diagolon, as you'll see in this video, is a meme. This is a fake story created in order, I would argue, to potentially get them to do exactly this. Like I was just mentioning the other day, where people would, in the beginning of the woke politics era, were making studies and submitting them for peer review, and they made literally everything up. Now, I think the one I was mentioning yesterday was about being overweight and so on. And they made up this entire article about how being fat was healthy. And even though it's unscientific and not true, the point is they made up all these grasping, personal, emotional arguments, and it got peer reviewed and then peer reviewed and accepted. And then it turned out that they made a big joke about it. They went on shows and laughed about it, and then they pulled it back. So these peer reviewers got caught driving forward politics based on non-scientific arguments. That's the reality of where this is today. Not that everything is like that, but that's the corporate mainstream co-option of this discussion or of scientific process. So here we're going to look at Justin Trudeau discussing this Diagolon story and using that to declare an emergency and argue about extremism, even though it was a fake story. It is a group of people that created a fake idea about a country that went across in a diagonal way of terrorists trying to overtake the country, and they fell for it. Or rather, I just argue they didn't even care if it was true. It progressed their agenda. And then consider whether you trust his other logic when it comes to science or anything else for that matter. I think, hold on, make sure it's the right one to start with. Yeah, okay.
Story for you. It's a true story.
The federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act.
Diagolon.
A far-right extremist group.
We're talking about a group that is organized, driven by an extreme ideology.
A so-called...
And don't forget the overlap here with the idea of the far-right extremists, the Azov movement, the whole thing, the conservative MAGA, QAnon. Like they're really trying to create the illusion of this exact problem. And that's why they're forced to use fake memes to progress the agenda.
Accelerationist group
Formed by a former member of the Canadian Armed Forces.
which aims to accelerate racial conflict to lead to the eventual creation of a white ethno-state.
It's stated
Real quick, this right here, I believe this right here, the clip. Oh, hold on, I went too far back or forward. Right here. This is fake. Right? That's his face on a fake. They manufactured this, and they're literally pointing at this stuff as dangerous as reality of extremism.
to accelerate racial conflict to lead to the eventual creation of a white ethno-state.
Its stated purpose is, quote, to incite a race war.
And by the way, I'm sure they did it on purpose, but here they are with their black friend laughing about how they made this up.
Dude, it's over. It's fucking time. Members of Parliament are talking about a meme to justify a state of emergency.
They're super.
Imagine you make up an entire fake story and your government declares a state of emergency because of that story. I mean, how ridiculous is that? It shows you their level of research, their level of discernment, or rather they just don't care. The image you're seeing here is the fake map they created, and that's where the name comes from. A diagonal country. How stupid.
Dude, did we predict this on one of the old fucking streams?
Of course, my stream is dropping off all of a sudden. I'm going to give it a second. But so you guys know, he is, there is cursing throughout this. I should have said at the beginning. So it's usually a family-friendly show. I apologize for the cursing. But it's just this ridiculous. Let me know in the chat if you guys can still hear me. It's just, this continues to frustrate me how this even is possible, by the way. It doesn't matter. I bring it up every time. I'm just going to wait for it to potentially come back. Can you guys hear me in the chat? Let me know. Just like yesterday, right at the most important parts, suddenly drops out. What a shock. Am I getting all robotic like we were before? There we go. Starting to come back. Let's continue.
Remember Diagonal country all the way to Alaska? Dude, you know, here it is. All the way from Florida, all the way up. Super diagonal country.
The Justin Trudeau regime declared war on a pretend country that doesn't exist.
The federal government the emergency time.
How much vitriol do we have to see?
I mean, think about how stupid this is. Like the idea that they would argue that honk honk, which by the way is just another meme, which you know, look, you could argue there are people in those circles that may have certain ideology or believe certain things, but to just broad stroke the entire thing as Hail Hitler, that is as stupid as arguing the OK sign is about white power. Now, is there somebody out there who used it that way? Probably. Who knows? But to say that Trump, because he does his same, like what he's done long before this, or I've done without even realizing it, you get called a conspiracy. It's just, these people don't care facts. This is a progressing an agenda. Gosh darn it. My stream continues to drop out right now. I guess I'll just continue. And it just frustrates me that this even happens.
You need people like me. So you can point and say, that's a bad guy. That's okay. I've been a bad guy for you.
How funny.
I made this on my phone as a pretend flag for a pretend country that doesn't exist. Its vice president is a goat figurine named Philip who has an extremely hard time with narcotics.
Diagolon was found.
I mean, apparently you literally can make this stuff up. I mean, my God, how embarrassing. And you know what's even worse? As they haven't even cared to address that, right? So they will move happily past this. And the media that towed those lines without thinking will do the same because they're all children, all fighting for political relevance. And it's pathetic. Here's another clip, and it just says, he is a transparent Canadian veteran. So he's a veteran of the military in Canada, by the way, with serious, valid concerns about what's going on in his country. He served and suffered for. He has never hidden from anybody, right? They try to act like he's some secret, secluded white supremacist. It's just, they don't even know what they're talking about. They're just leaning into a narrative they create about anybody they want to frame this way. That's how bad this is.
There's a problem between, a friend of mine, Tyson, the owner of Real Canadian Recreation, a veterans charity, being assaulted for not wearing a mask and having his neck near broken and killed. The guy's got serious neck injuries already, but and then now a vehicle plowed through protesters in Winnipeg. Is the media or any of you lying hypocrites ever going to admit that we're not the problem? You go on and on and on. These violent people, they're so violent, and the rhetoric, and the violent. Last time I checked, we're not the ones hurting anybody. Very much the opposite, in fact. And I said this and said this and said this. Your rhetoric, your gaslighting, and you've got words coming out of the Prime Minister's mouth like, how should we tolerate these people? Similar things being said by premiers and doctors, the top doctors, right? The top sellouts all over the country, which is the green light to the rest of the citizenry that, yes, it is okay to attack these people because look at them. They're the problem. They're scum. They're dirt. Oh, the unvaccinated. Oh, they're not wearing masks. Oh. They did this. They've created this environment. You want to persecute people like me and others for just telling the truth, saying, oh, you're inciting hate. You're inciting hate. Nobody that I know that's ever been associated with me or any, no one's attacking anybody. The opposite. The people that follow CBC and listen to your garbage are now driving cars through crowds of people. They're strangling veterans in businesses for not wearing a piece of paper on their face when he's got a medical exemption. Who's responsible? You know damn well who it is.
I completely agree with that. And anybody honest with themselves can see that too. You don't create a situation where you have, as even the Prime Minister of New Zealand admitted, two different classes of people. And she said, yes, that's what we're doing. Completely owned up to it. You are literally creating a two-tier society. That's exactly what used to be, conspiracy theory or bigotry or racism or whatever else, except now it's okay because we agree with it. It's pathetic. And the point about this is that was him before this. He's just an honest individual, or, I don't know the person, but in the context of this discussion, he's a person who is fighting for what he believes in. Not the racist, extremist, white supremacist that he pretended, or rather, I don't even argue he pretended to be that. He just pretended to be a group that they then made that. How embarrassing is that? Here's the corporate media discussion of this, guys. This is August 23rd. Diagolon. What to know about the group whose founder shook Pierre Poilievre's hand. Seriously. This is on the 23rd. This is 2 days ago. This information has been there since the 21st. This one since the 21st, probably before that. So they are aware this is not real, and they just don't care. Dangerous white supremacist, and look, it shook this guy's hand, co-opted by the far right. This is why we know things like January 6th and the push about all of this is a psyop, guys. How do you don't fall for stuff like this if it's based on the reality? Here's CTV. What is the Diagolon extremist group, and what does it want? I mean, how embarrassing. This is corporate media today. Anywhere you look. A National Observer. Pierre Poilievre? I forget. I've heard his name pronounced. Dangerous dance with a Diagolon extremist. My God. This guy will go down. He should be famous for this. I mean, that's crazy. He just trolled the entire Canadian government. Now, the point is, this is the kind of thing that they base their declaration of emergency on. Their discussion of asking, do we tolerate these people? They're racist, misogynistic. Well, isn't that exactly what you're being when you completely fabricate entire stories about things you don't even understand or you don't even care to understand? Yeah,